this is Shamel, and this is the first video of 4 for the Explore online class. We're going to talk about a few different things today. I want to start by talking about embellishments, and the first idea that we could make the embellishments before we actually know what we're going to scrapbook, and also just some different tips and techniques for making circle embellishments, since that's what we've been focusing on this week. So these are some of the tools that I use to make circle embellishments. The first are sets of dies that you would use in a die cutter. They're called Nestabilities by Spellbinders, and the idea is that you choose a shape and you buy a set. So if you want circles, then they come in all these different sizes, and then you would just pick the one that you want and use that, and then they naturally make all those different layers. I use the second smallest one the most of anything, I think. Perfect for embellishments. And then they have other shapes, and so this is a pinked circle with a kind of a rickrack type edge or zigzag edge, and they fit together as well. So you can take the second smallest one here and the second smallest one here, and you can see how if you cut both of those, the plain circle is going to fit inside the pink circle. So I actually don't own a lot of the Nestabilities. I have one more set other than this, but I use these two several times a week. So very useful and worthwhile for circle embellishments. And then of course there are punches. I use just plain circle punches in graduated sizes. These are by Fiskars. They're the ones that you squeeze this way instead of having to put lots of pressure on a punch that way. And they also do them in scallops. That's why I don't have the scalloped one in the die cut, because I have lots of scallop circle punches, so I didn't really need to duplicate. And then this one is a pinked circle by Martha Stewart. And I think she just makes this in two sizes, one in the small regular lever punch, and then in a slightly larger one in the anywhere hole punch, which is one you can move because it doesn't have a piece like this where the paper has to go in. It comes apart and you can snap it onto your paper. We'll look at one of those on another day in another video. Okay, so that's mostly what I use when I am working on circle embellishments, but I also mix in things that are circular for my pre-made embellishment stash. So these are some little pinwheels that are by American Crafts, and this is a partial sheet. They came with lots of smaller ones as well, but I've already used those. So you don't have to think of just flat circles. You can think of things that are just circular, and they might be a bit more dimensional. And then I also will then pull in circle-shaped stickers, or sometimes I will free cut circles. Buttons are circular, gems are circular. So lots of different things we can add as we layer things up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with some embellishments, and I don't have the page planned. I'm just going to make a set of circular embellishments, and we'll start there. So to start, I've used the second smallest circle die to punch or to cut just a bunch of circles all in the same color. I've cut way more than I need. We're only going to make 9. I think I cut 12 just so I could have a couple spares in case anything went wrong. And so I'll put these few over to the side. When you die cut, you'll also end up with these leftover pieces like this. I don't put them in the bin straight away because sometimes they're useful for inking or spraying. So I tend to wait until the project is done, and then if I don't need them anymore, then I'll put them in the bin. So I'm going to start with this piece, and then I want things that will layer on top of that. So I picked some different scraps of paper out of my scrap bin. None of this is full sheets. And I'm going to look to see if I have something that will fit inside. So I'm going to start with the Martha Stewart pinked circle and just punch one of these and layer it on top. Now I could make all 9 identical. What I'd like to do is make them similar but not all identical. So I think probably I'll make 3 of each design. So I'm going to go ahead and punch 2 more of these and make a row with the grid paper. And then for some more color, got some green polka dots. I'll do 3 of those. And then a different texture. This is kind of a textured wood grain paper. It's not a regular scrapbooking paper. It's more like a paper you would use for bookbinding or for lining envelopes or something. It's a bit thinner, but it has a embossed texture. Okay, so I have those layers put together. Now I need to go one step smaller. I'm pretty sure this next smallest punch is going to be too small, so or too big. Let me just look. Yeah, it's the same size, so I'm not going to use that punch. So then I'm going to use something that's not cut from paper. So I'm going to look for some buttons or some die cuts or something that's round that's going to fit inside that circle. Okay, so I found a button for each circle and just decided to stick within a similar color but not exactly the same button. So red for this row, blue for this row, and green for this row. And then I kind of wanted to keep looking for anything else to layer up that wouldn't be exactly the same on each row. So I found these little graph paper flowers, and I'm going to put them between the green pattern paper and the buttons. And I'm not going to add flowers to the other rows, just this green one. Nothing's adhered here, so that's why everything's moving a little bit. And then I need something to go on top of the buttons. Now I can just sew the buttons and call that done, or I can add something on top. So for this middle row, for this top row I mean, I'm going to add these little candy dots. They come in all different colors, but I've been using this white color because then you can just change it to be whatever you like. And it looks like the top of a brad, but it is just a paper disc. So you don't have the mess of the back and you can just glue it on. So I'm just using Distress ink on the ink applicator to make it an aged brown instead of the bright white. And that will cover up the buttonholes on those 3 buttons. For other rows, I want to add different things. I want to add some pearls and some gems. So I'll have a look at these and see what looks okay. So sometimes the pearls are just big enough to cover up the buttonholes. I'm not a huge fan of showing empty holes on buttons, but I'm also not a huge fan of wanting to sit and sew the buttons, so sometimes I have to compromise and I just cover them up. Sometimes I sew them. Oops. So do pearls on that row, and then some little gems on this row. I think these may be too small to cover the buttonholes. Let's see. Yep. So maybe I'll leave that for just a second and put something else on top. So I think at this point I'll go to my favorite go-to embellishment, which is a butterfly. Which means I'm going to pull out my 2 favorite butterfly punches. They're all the same design, just in different sizes. So I'm going to try this one and see how that looks. Maybe I'll make the butterflies polka dotted, since I covered up most of this green. Yeah, and then I can put butterfly on each of those buttons. And then I'll end up putting the rhinestone in the middle of the butterfly. Then I also, that punch has the 2 different sizes, so I can add these little butterflies to the center up here. Okay, so now that I have everything stacked up and I know what order I want it to go in, I think I'll probably move these so that they're not on the center, but they're kind of off the side. But that's a little hard to do just until they're glued. So once I have everything figured out where it's going to go, then I'll start inking and gluing. I want to add ink to all the different edges, and I just do that with Distress ink on a bit of foam on an ink applicator tool. And I'll do that to all the circles, all the butterflies, all those flowers, until everything is inked. Okay, so now I have all the pieces inked and I'll start adhering them. I'm going to use a combination of 2 things. Just my regular flat adhesive. I use the Permanent Dots by American Crafts, but you can use whatever you like. And then just some very small foam squares for the elements that I need a little bit of dimension underneath. So then I just start stacking everything up. And making sure that everything is adhered. So the buttons, I use the flat adhesive. If your adhesive doesn't want to hold the buttons, you can use like a really sticky double-sided tape or a glue dot. And then underneath these candy dots, I'm using the foam squares because they're raised up, so you need a little bit of dimensional adhesive. And then with the butterflies, what I do is I run the flat adhesive just on one wing, and I fold it and attach just that side. So that's what this row will look like. Next row, same thing, flat adhesive for the circle, and flat adhesive for the flower because it has a little bit of dimension on its own. So if I just put the center flat, the petals will still be raised. Sometimes if the buttons are domed, it's easier to just put the adhesive straight on the flower because that's flat. And then the pearl was already adhesive, so that's that one all put together. And then, oops, let's see if I can get that in the middle. And I'll put flat adhesive on the button, and the rhinestone is adhesive. Okay, so I've attached everything. I ended up adding some teeny tiny little pearls to the little butterflies, and I attached the larger butterflies with a foam square, so they're raised up off the buttons just a little bit. So everything's adhered, and then I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of mist to give them a little bit of shine. I tend to do this if I'm just going to go over a finished set of embellishments. I'd either use a really, really neutral light brown, which is sand. You can tell I use that one a lot. It's almost empty. And or you can use like a white that's just a pearl or a silver shimmer. And all I do is just spray them a little bit, leave them a few seconds to dry, and then I can worry about the layout that they're going to go onto. So our next step is choosing what exactly our page will be about. Since we've made some embellishments and had a little bit of creative energy going, then we need to figure out what those embellishments are going to go onto. And I do tend to think that if you make the embellishments, do go ahead and as soon as you've finished them, try and figure out where they're going to go, because sometimes it's easy with the idea of making the embellishments first to let them sit and then you'll forget about them or not ever get around to putting them on a layout. So it's nice to then immediately start to think, where am I going to go with this next? And at the same time, you can also be thinking about colors, because we've used such a narrow set of colors in that in the set of embellishments, that there's still a lot of potential for different things we can add. So I just want to open up an album that I'm working on at the moment, and I'm just going to kind of look through for some gaps. If you aren't familiar with the way I sort my albums, I scrapbook in random order, not chronological at all, but I store all my pages in chronological order. So this particular album is all about the recent trip we took, but the pages are in order even though I don't make them in order. So sometimes you'll see like a completely empty page protector, and that's because I know there's a huge section in here missing. For example, if you don't know about this trip, we went to 11 countries, so it will be more than one album. But for example, there are big empty gaps here because I haven't printed the photos for what comes in between here. So this is one country, and this is the next country. Well, there's quite a lot left in between these 2 points. And then these 2 pages in the one page protector are the only 2 I've made from this particular country. And I have plenty more photos to scrapbook from there. So there's another empty page protector here. And then this leads into the 3rd country. Does that make sense? Hope so. I wanted to pause here if you haven't seen this layout. This is, again, circle embellishments using similar colors but different elements on each one. And you'll even see some things repeat, like there's that same graph paper flower that I just used. So I'm looking for perhaps a gap that just kind of inspires me for what I could do. I already have lots and lots of photos from this trip printed, so I know I can find something that will work. So here's a gap. These are the same day. Let's see when this starts. Okay, so these 6 pictures and these 2 are from the same day, but I have plenty more, and I could go grab some pictures that will make a page that will go here, and that's how I'll make that decision. So then thinking about color. In this album, it's really, really easy for me to think about color because, I don't know if you noticed, but all of the pages are the same color. The whole album is based on craft cardstock. And there are a few examples where you'll see this dark brown, but once you get to the front of that layout, it is actually craft cardstock here, and I've just put it on dark brown. There's a few times when I start a layout on a whole sheet and then decide I need to cut it down to this smaller mat and then add that to a bigger sheet. So when I'm doing that, I'm taking that craft smaller and then putting it on brown and always using this paint that's in the same color as the paper. And that way I'm going to just have a few darker pages here and there, but they'll always be on that same brown and they'll always have the craft in there. So essentially my color scheme this album makes that decision for me. But you'll notice that each of the pages do have their own unique colors on top of that craft. So, and by chance, there's that same, well, not the same, similar green polka dot, same color, different size. So, so I'll probably use some similar colors, and I'll go see if I have any scraps of these particular papers left over, and I'll make the layout that's going to fit here. There are lots of other ways to choose your colors. You can choose the colors directly from the photo. Like take a photo like this. Oops, if you can see that. Take a photo like this and then scrapbook it in blue, white, and brown. Totally acceptable. Let's see if I've got a different example here. Yeah, like this one. It's still with this craft neutral background, but the other colors are coming from the photo. So to pick up on this green in the background and the yellow in the trim on the bag here. Or you can let the mood choose the colors and ignore the colors of the picture, which is what I did here. I could scrapbook these beach photos all in blue and tan. It's quite a safe beach color combination. But I didn't want to go overboard with that, and I have a lot of photos from this day. So I just decided to go with things that were a bit more in the mood of the day, and this was a day, this moment had a lot of energy, and so I wanted to use some brighter colors. So I threw in the red, even though there's no red in the picture, and the green, even though there's no green in the picture. And if you put red and green together, you do always have that little risk of it being a bit Christmassy. But with the craft and the blue, and then tying in some blue from the photos into the embellishment, I hope it doesn't come off too Christmassy. It shouldn't. So different things. So you can either let the album make the decision for you, take your colors from the photographs, or use a mood scheme to figure out what colors you would use. Okay, so I went away to find some photos that would fit in that spot in my album, and something that would fit with this theme that we've worked with this week, which is adventure and things like that. So I have these two pictures, and I'm not in either of them, but I took both of them. And there is a story behind these two pictures that I think I can tell that's really going to deal with the adventure theme. So I'm going to use those two 4x6 photos. And then I've pulled some supplies. I've got the green polka dot paper that I used in the embellishments. I have this Cosmo Cricket paper that that was featured on the page that's opposite this in the album. And this is what's left of it. It's got a red polka dot on the back. I had these that were a similar color, even though they're from a different collection. These are from Echo Park. I'm not sure which or if any of these I'll use, but I thought they had some potential for journaling. A little scrap of yellow, because I kind of wanted to pick up the yellow that's in this pattern to have the yellow with the green. So those are all small pieces. And of course I've got the 9 embellishments that we've made. And then I have these two, and where I normally use lots of scraps, this is going to seem perhaps a little over the top. I have 2 sheets of this same paper, and because they came in a collection pack where you get 2 of each design, and I haven't used this one at all, and I've had this paper several months. I really like the idea of this giant A, and I'm thinking that I might be able to use this paper in 2 ways, so I might need both sheets, where I might like cut a box from this and then use the A as well, so I would need both. So I'll end up with lots of scraps for that, but the other side of this is just a plain writing paper, so I think even if I just have scraps, I'll still be able to use a lot of that. I don't think I'm going to have any problems using the leftovers, so I'm going to go ahead and cut into those 2 whole sheets. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with the design. Now, we had in the sketch the idea to do the 2 4x6 together, and then the grid of 9 will kind of read as one embellishment around here, and with the title and journaling, and I'll see if the journaling is going to fit better here at the top or here at the bottom. So that's just kind of my my roadmap as to where I'm going. I'm going to go ahead and start with the idea of this big paper, and I'm going to cut quite a large box from one of these. So I've cut this pattern paper to 8.5 by 11, and then I'm just cutting out the A from the second pattern. And so I've cut this shape out, and then I'm just going to use a file to bring out the edges and make them a little bit imperfect, because I'm never going to get as clean a line as the one that's printed. So I'm just using a nail file to rough it up a little bit. I'm going to use foam squares to attach this right on top of the same spot in the pattern, but so it will be raised up off the page. So I've attached this with the pop dots, and I've matted the 8.5 by 11 sheet on some brown cardstock just with a thin mat, and I've gone ahead and attached that just pretty square in the corner over to the side. And then I'm going to take these 2 photos and put them on a mat with that brown cardstock as well. And I usually, if I do 2 4x6 photos together like this, I put them right together so there's no gap in between. So I just line them up. But if you prefer to have the separation in between, you can just leave a bit more room there and have the line of the cardstock. So I'm just going to trim those 2 sides. So now I have the photos ready to go. And I'm going to run my title right over the top of the sky space here in the picture. I'll go ahead and adhere that. I'm just looking at this edge to get that pretty much straight. And then I want to start thinking about those circle embellishments. Let me just have a look at them straight onto the page and see if I need any more layers behind there. Now, I made them in little rows where they were all matching across, but I want to mix them up as I put them on the layout. Okay, so I'm liking the grouping here, but I think it's a little bit too busy on top of this busy pattern in the background. So I'm going to find something that's going to go here underneath the circles to kind of take away the busyness of the background, something a bit more plain. So I have some cream colored vellum, and I'm just going to move the embellishments off and put that underneath first. So that's going to go, in fact, I think it can probably tuck underneath there. Right. So then, in that case, I just need to put the adhesive on the bit that will be hidden. Straighten it up a little bit. Oops. And then I can go ahead and adhere the circles on top. Okay, so the vellum keeps the background here from being a little bit too busy, but it does also mean I want to pick up that color a little bit, so I'm going to go with a brighter yellow for the title lettering, and I'm going to mix in some smaller letter stickers in this wood grain finish. It's kind of a cream letter on a wood grain background, and I'm going to spell out looking for adventure up here to go with the theme of what I'm going to tell about this day. I'm going to go ahead and start with the larger stickers because they're the most problematic and hard to get the spacing right. And I know that this word's going to be pretty big, so I'm going to go ahead and start quite far into the photo. And then I'm just spelling in reverse. Okay, so the title fits just across, and then for the smaller letters in the title, I wanted to have the space line up with the taller letter here, the T. So I just started with the 4 and then spelled looking backwards from the G, so that it all fits together there nice and even. And that's left me some different spaces where I can go to for my journaling and also for putting in a little bit more color. So I want to work on this space up here and perhaps something a little down here. What I'm thinking is I'm going to add a journaling card that'll be roughly around here to tell the story behind these pictures. And then I'm going to add a little bit of color, and I'm thinking this needs a little bit of red. So I'm going to add that probably here or possibly here, and then a matching piece down here in this corner. Okay, so I've added the journaling on a journaling card. I ended up not using these original ones that I had pulled out because I wanted one that went horizontal, but this wasn't quite the right color. The yellow one would have worked, but it was vertical. So I went back to the embellishment sheet that matches this paper collection and found one there. And then I added some of the red polka dot here and here with the date and details down here and just a little word sticker up here. And so I'm almost done. I do want to add a little bit of color around the edges, and I do that with the glimmer mist that I sprayed over these before. But instead of spraying, this time I'll use a paintbrush. So you just shake it up and open the bottle. And then I take a fine paintbrush and I take it to the straight edges. So I just paint on a few straight lines here and there. Acts like a little bit of a shadow, but I don't really add as much thought as you would if you wanted it to be a realistic shadow. I just kind of put it here and there to add some color. And then still with the paintbrush, and I'll do some spattering of the ink, but I want to cover up the photos, so I don't do that. So just take a little bit of something that's just nearby. That was the packaging from the vellum. And just sprinkle the dots of ink over the page. Maybe a little bit around the title. And there we go. So that's my page complete. I'll just wait for it to dry, and then that will go into my travel album. Just one last thing, I wanted to show you a few different ideas for using circle embellishments on page design. So I'm just looking in an older album to show you a few examples from here. This is a layout that again uses 2 4x6 photos, but has what would be 3 circle embellishments, but I've swapped out the middle one for something in another shape. So there's still this circle shape behind here, but 2 of the layered circles and then something else in a rectangle, just for a bit of variety. And this one is a very similar idea of taking lots of different things that are circle shaped and layering them up. What I did was start with the straight part of the layout, and that left me with all this empty space, so then I just took all the scraps from this collection of papers and started punching them and put the big pieces in first, and then filled the gaps with smaller punch shapes. And just anywhere I could find a gap, I'd put something circular in there. And this is one of my favorite layouts I've ever done. So I like all the different random circles there. And then I've used this technique again, but on a smaller part of the page. I'll just find that layout for you. This is kind of similar, but with oblong and uneven circles. But this one is very, very similar. It's just that instead of being the whole top portion of the page, it's one corner. But the very same thing, I just took the scraps that were left over from the pattern papers I'd used and then punched them into smaller and smaller circles. I did this in a workshop, so a few of you may actually have this layout in your album. And then one last page in here that I wanted to show you, which is this one. Let me just move it over so you can see. This is the same design technique, but this is the cheat version because this is a piece of pattern paper that just happens to have all different size circles filled in. And so the top half of the layout has the photos, the journaling, the title, and then one half of the layout is all circles. It's just that instead of having to build all those embellishments, I used a printed paper. So all different ways to use circles if you want to keep using those embellishments that we made, but do something other than use them in a grid. And thanks for tuning in for today's video.